All right, hey, fourth grade. Today we're making this awesome winter tree with lots of different greens. If you look closely at my tree, I've got lots of green. I've got blue greens, yellow greens, light greens, darker greens. So today we're going to be using a paintbrush and some tempera paint to mix colors to make our own winter tree. So today you're going to be using a black piece of paper. The first thing you have to make sure you do is write your name on the back using a pencil. Even though it's black, you can still see the pencil because it's like a silver. You can also write your room number and for A, B, or C. Flip it over, and you need a medium-sized paintbrush. So not a giant paintbrush, just a medium-sized paintbrush like this. What you're going to do is you're going to share your paint with your neighbors, and we're going to start by making our own green or using one of the greens that's already in here. So sometimes the paint is a little messy. You might want to push your sleeves up or get an apron if you're worried about your clothes. You can also get a paper towel if you need one. And then I'm actually not going to use water today, and I'll show you why. If you would like to use water, you totally can to clean out your brush, but as long as you follow my directions, you actually don't need the water. So the first thing you're going to do is start with a green. Maybe I'll just start with this dark green that I have, okay? And I'm just going to get a tiny bit on the bristles. I only want a little bit at a time because we're going to start with the top of our winter tree, which is the smallest section. So the first thing you're going to do is make like a upside down V shape wherever you want the top of your tree to be. And today we're going to be using our brush to make texture. So texture is when you create a feeling that it feels a certain way, if that makes sense. So like if it was smooth, that would be texture, or rough, that would be texture. I know that this evergreen tree, which has green on it all year long, which is why it's called evergreen, has a really rough like pines on the tree that make it kind of prickly. So I'm going to use my paintbrush in a way that shows that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take some of my green that I had and put it on my messy mat. So I'm using a messy mat to protect the table, but I'm also going to mix colors on this. So once you have all the paint off of your paintbrush where it doesn't really come off anymore, then you can actually just go ahead and dip right into another color like this other green to make a new green. Once you mix all of that in, and there's not much on your paintbrush, I can even dip into the white, and you can see I did not mess up the white because all of my paint was off of my paintbrush and on the messy mat. So now I have a new green that I can use, and I can go a little bit bigger. So I'm actually going to just paint in the direction that my pines are going, and they're all coming down and out. So that's how my paintbrush is going. So I'm tickling the paper. Let me get a little bit more. I'm tickling the paper, and I'm just going in that direction. So I'm not going back and forth this direction. That's not the way the bristles or the pines go. They come down. So I'm going to be painting in that direction too. And you can see when I just paint down and stop, I get a little bit of this texture that looks very realistic. I can also go back with this other color that I used first and kind of add some more texture back in if I lost some of it before. Okay, now let's make a different green. So let's go ahead and use some other colors like blue. I know blue is in green. So if I add some blue to this green, I'm going to have a bluish green. So now I can keep going down underneath these bristles or these pines and make some more. And as I go down, my tree is going to start getting bigger. Now remember that I am going in the directions that my pines lay, and they lay like this. So this is the direction I'm always using my paintbrush in. I could also take a little bit of yellow just to make my own green. If you decide you want to make a darker green, you can use a teeny tiny bit of black, but that's it. You don't want too much because it can take over very easily. And I'm painting down. So my paintbrush is the ballerina. It dances on its tippy toes. It's like you're doing a ballet, right? You're not going to the booty scooting ballet where you push down really hard. You're just being gentle. All right, as you paint, you might notice that some of the black shows through. That's actually a good thing. This is called dry brushing. That's where you're using all of the paint on your paintbrush, and you should be able to see a little bit of the black underneath because your paintbrush is getting kind of dry. And that creates even more texture for your tree to make it even more realistic. How about a little bit more yellow? So even though it's not covering all the way, I'm actually happy that it's doing that because it's creating this rough, fluffy tree texture. And remember, I'm always painting until all of the paint is off of my bristles, and that's why I don't actually need a cup of water to clean my brush. Now, if there's still some on your paintbrush after you're done and you're ready for a new color, just kind of rub it off on your messy mat like that. Let's add a little bit of this lighter blue and see what kind of blue we can create. I didn't have much of that left. If you run out of a color, just ask me and we'll refill it. Do a little bit of this. I'm gonna make this really, really, really dark bluish green. Oh, that's nice. Look at that. So my challenge to you boys and girls is to see how many different kinds of greens you can create on your own. And I also want to see how much texture can you create by using the bristles of your paintbrush to mimic the pines of your tree. And remember, if you start losing some of your texture, you can go back and add some more on top of different sections. And you know you're about finished when you reach a point where you're going to slowly start to touch the sides of the paper if you keep going. So right here is probably a good place for me to stop. If you have a lot more room though, you're going to want to keep going. So there's not a limit. You should probably have at least 5 sections of colors, but you can keep going as long as you have room. Once you're finished with your bristles or your pines, you're going to rub off the rest of that paint on your messy mat, and then you can pick a color for the tree trunk. So I'm just going to use some of this brown, and I'm going to kind of paint a rectangle at the bottom. Sometimes you can't even see the tree trunk because there's so many of the pines covering it, and that's okay. So if you don't have a base, that's no big deal. You can also be fancy, add a little bit of white, rub it off a little bit so you don't have too much, just a tiny bit on your paintbrush, and you can kind of add a little bit of white to the side and then rub it off so you don't have anything left. And then mix your colors together so that your tree trunk looks a little bit more realistic. That means that the light is shining on it on one side. And that is how you make a pretty awesome textured winter tree. That's all we're going to do today. We're going to let this dry, put it on the drying rack, and then we're going to add to this next time. See ya.